All right, so this is part one of the Astroqueen Into Submission Fuzz Club podcast. And I am lucky enough to have Daniel from Astroqueen with me here. And we're going to chat a little bit about Into Submission and more before we get into the Fuzz Club portion. So welcome, Daniel. And thanks a lot for joining me on this.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So when I started getting into like stoner rock and stuff was probably like only, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago or something. I was just kind of like tired of the metal scene that I was, into at the time. I was in high school, so kind of into that kind of stuff. And I wanted more like Queens of Stone Age type of stuff. And I just went down this like rabbit hole on YouTube and Bandcamp and stuff, listening to Truck Fighters, which led me to Rollerball and Lowrider, which led me to Astroqueen. And I've said this before, but Into Submission is one of those albums that I always go back to. It's what got me into stoner rock in a lot of ways. It's like Hall of Fame material for me. It's why I'm still talking about stoner rock and everything else. And when I discovered it, I was like, oh, this is my new favorite band. This is my new favorite album. I wonder what else they got. And unfortunately, it wasn't much. There wasn't much else out there. And apparently you guys had gone on like a hiatus or of some sort at that time. And I was bummed. But, fast forward, 8 something years later, and Lowrider made a comeback, and now you guys are reforming, and there's new things in the works. So I couldn't be happier, and I'm really stoked for this episode on Into Submission and talking to you about it.
Oh, thank you very much, man.
Yeah. So tell me about what it was like for you and Astroqueen. In 2001, I think this album came out, and what was that scene like for you guys? What did it look like? Did you know? Kind of what it would become, or how big was this thing, and what did it feel like when you put out this album into that?
I think back then we had been listening to bands like Fu Manchu and Caius, Electric Wizard, Cathedral since the mid 90s, I would say, like 96, somewhere around there. And we just discovered this new type of music. We were really young, maybe 18 years old, and we had been playing together for a couple of years prior to that, but when we discovered this new kind of desert scene, we just started writing music, and we spent a couple of years just writing, and then when we kind of developed our own style, I think a lot of the influence came from like more metal type music.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we were never really a pure stoner rock band in that sense. I think we just had a lot of different influences, and yeah, we recorded the Into Submission in I think it was May or June of the year 2000 with Andy LaRock, the guitarist from King Diamond.
Yeah, I want to get into that here in a little while too.
Yeah, and I mean, we just made the best record we possibly could back then. It was all recorded on analog tape, and yeah, we were really prepared when we entered the studio. We had been practicing for like 5 or 6 days every week for like 2 or 3 years prior to making the album. And yeah, we recorded the album. I think we didn't know that many other bands in Sweden. I knew a couple of guys from Dozer. We used to be on a kind of I can't remember what it was called. It was like kind of a community program on my PC. What was it called? It was not ICQ. It was like way before then. There was something called hashtag Stoner Rock, which was like a global channel. So that's where I met Carl Daniel Lidén, who was in Demon Cleaner at the time. And he would later be in Dozer as well. And we were just like a really small community of bands, but we never really belonged to the scene in that sense. We were just doing our own thing, I think. And
There
this
is
is
a
like,
lot of overlap, it seems, with
oh
a lot of
yeah,
especially the Sweden bands. But like you
mm,
said, Carl Daniel Leiden and
yeah,
yourselves and Dozer and Greenleaf and all these bands, like there's a lot of like members in and out, and there seems to
yeah,
be a really strong scene there, and there still is. I mean, we're still
yeah.
talking about it all these years later and stuff, but it's cool to
I,
see all
th-
the overlap for sure.
I think we were kind of living in the wrong part of Sweden because we are on the west coast, near Gothenburg, and there wasn't that many bands around here. There was like one other band called the Awesome Machine.
Yeah, I want to talk about them in a little bit too, for sure.
Uh, and then you had like more up from north, and then you had the Stockholm scene, but we were not that kind of included in it, or we didn't know that many people. This is like
Yeah,
early days of internet as well, and
right. Yeah.
we didn't do that many gigs either, and there was no touring or anything like that. So
So what was the reception like? I believe it came out on what, Pavement Records? Is
yeah,
that what it was called? Pavement
yeah,
Records? What was the
yeah.
reception like when you put it out? Was it, I mean, was the stoner rock scene, happening? Did you get a good reception? Did you sell a bunch of records, or was it pretty quiet and you decided to give up at that point? What was that kind of like?
I actually don't remember. I think people liked the album, and we read some good reviews and stuff, but it wasn't like we heard that much about it.
Hmm.
Especially because there was like no social media or anything back then, so you couldn't really get the instant feedback.
Yeah.
Sometimes there would be someone who read something in a magazine in Germany or something, but it didn't really reach us. And I think we back then, I don't know, we didn't have really any expectations. We just wanted to make music. So, but yeah, it's not like it is today. Now
Yeah.
we get way more feedback from the album. I think it kind of just disappeared. Um, so
So
yeah,
did that cause the breakup hiatus? What happened there? What made you move on to other things around this time?
no, I wouldn't say so. No, we kept writing, and we kept being active for a couple of years. I think up to like 2005 or something. And that's when our other guitarist, he got really busy with another band, and our drummer, he decided that it was time to quit playing drums, and so everything just kind of, I don't know, it died out a bit. And I started doing other kinds of music, and we just kind of put the band on hiatus. It wasn't like we publicly just said that it's over. It just kind
Mhm.
of naturally happened. And then a couple of guys in the band, they became parents, and
Sure.
life happened. And
Yeah.
but now here we are again 20 years later or something, and it's just awesome.
Do you guys were you guys aware in the last 20 years of kind of the impact of Astroqueen and Into Submission on the scene, or was that all kind of news to you more
Yeah, that was,
recently?
yeah, it's like more recently. I think
Really?
someone told me that we had a lot of lists. I think it was Marco from Majestic Mountain. He
Sure.
When he first reached out to us, he just said like, you have a lot of listeners on Spotify. And I was like, what, are we on Spotify? It's pretty
Yeah.
much like that.
Yeah.
So it seems like people kind of discovered the album way later, I think.
Yeah, sure. So, tell me about that kind of new, interest. What happened with Marco and Majestic Mountain, and what made you guys wanna get back together and play again together, play shows, write new music, anything
Mm.
like that? What happened there?
We had been talking about it for, I think, like 8 years ago or something like that, 10 years ago maybe, that we would start jamming again. So me and our drummer and guitarist, we kind of got together in a rehearsal room and just played, and it was awesome. We still remember the songs, but we were busy, and we would keep saying like, okay, let's see in a couple of weeks and meet up again, but it just never really happened until I think 2 years ago, when the vinyl reissue was really taking form.
Yeah.
That's when we also kind of got back together in the rehearsal room, and we just started playing, and then we just noticed that this is so much fun. and
So, I'm
and then
assuming there's new songs
gig
being written, and what does that feel like? What does it sound like? Does it feel like, the early 2000s again? Are you guys
yeah,
trying something different, or
yeah, it truly does.
Yeah.
It's really, it's like a mind warp
Yeah.
almost. When we get back together, it just feels like no time has passed.
Awesome.
It's really strange, but yeah, it's fun.
tell me about the song Catapult, because that was an unreleased track on the album, as far as I understand, right? And it was included on the vinyl reissue recently.
Yeah.
And I've been listening to it a lot lately because I've listened to Into Submission so many times, but it was
Yeah.
something new to my ears, you know? And it fits the album really well, and it's a great tune. So
Thanks.
what made you guys leave that one off the original issue, or re-release it, or unreleased?
Yeah.
You know?
The true story is that when we were recording the album Into Submission, there was like, I think we had like one more song to record, which was Catapult, and Andy received a phone call from Sweden Rock Festival, and they had there was like a huge band that had canceled, so they just called, like, hey, can King Diamond come and play in 2 days? And he was offered a lot of money for that gig as well, so he was just like, fuck, I need to do this gig. I know you are still in the studio and you have like 2 more days to record, but I'll get an assistant in. And I think something happened when we recorded Catapult that Andy wasn't really happy about something in that song. So when he came back, he was just like, oh fuck, this should have been done differently, blah blah blah. Let's leave that out for now, and we'll just get on with mixing the album. So we kind of decided to just like leave that song out and mix the album, and then it was kind of forgotten until we found it somewhere in the archive. Like, holy shit,
Yeah,
there's Catapults. So
interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
So let's talk about Andy a little bit from King Diamond, because I just discovered this earlier when I was just doing a little bit of background on Astroqueen again, and we just did a Fuzz Club episode on the Awesome Machine, because their album is being re-released on Ripple. It's called,
cool.
It's Ugly or Nothing. And when we were talking about that, we discovered that Andy helped produce that album. And we all thought that was so strange and so random and just, unexpected. And it really does have kind of a similar tone to Astroqueen. I think in the episode I even brought up Into Submission, just a similar sound and vibe, and I think they're from Sweden and all that kind of stuff. And it was this album that I had never heard before, from a band that I had never heard before, and we're like, wow, I had this connection to Andy and King Diamond, and we still never heard it. That's so strange. And then to find out that he worked on Into Submission was really surprising too. So how did that come about?
I think that was pretty much the record label. They were just suggesting Andy, that he had a studio. Of course, we knew about Andy, and we all really digged King Diamond.
Does he have an ear for stoner rock, or like, what's
well,
the
he truly does. I mean, Into Submission sounds still today really good. But he had never done anything like that, I think, and he was really like, he was stoked about the fuzz sound on the guitars and stuff.
Sure.
Very different from the other stuff he was recording. So I just think it was a lucky strike. It was just random luck, I think, that it worked so well, because it made us sound different from many other bands.
That's a good segue into kind of one of my last questions here, is just the tone of this album. And I'm not a musician or much of one myself, and I don't know much about gear, but a lot of our listeners are gearheads. And what can you tell us about that tone, whether it's the amps or the effects or the pedals, or if it was Andy, what made this album sound the way it did?
Well, when it comes to the guitars, it was just my Gibson Explorer, straight into a fuzz face, the Jimi Hendrix one, the red one, and then straight into a 50-watt crate tube amp. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
That's as easy it is.
Nice.
Lots of volume, and yeah.
I think we found that in some of these albums that we've talked about, is that stripped back sound, less is more kind of a thing. And it tends to be the albums that we talk about that tone the most, is when it's just real stripped back and real simple. It's not when there's 1,000 different things going on. It's the real simple ones. So
I mean, even like the drums and stuff, it's all recorded in a room. There's no triggering or anything like that, and we were all playing in the same room. We did a couple of additional overdubs, of course, when it comes to guitars, and obviously the vocals were done afterwards, but we were all playing in the same room. We didn't play to a click track or anything like that, so it's just like that's just how we sound.
All right, last question. What is it sounding like now for Astroqueen, and what's the plan for 2024? Or what's the next what's next on the plate for Astroqueen?
I think the sound it's still us. I don't think it's gonna sound like 20 years has passed. I think a bit more experience. Our drummer is even better now than he was 20 years ago. Everyone is just better at their instruments, and a bit wiser. I think we're a bit more laid back these days. But yeah, it's still really raw and it's really fuzzy and really heavy.
Yeah.
And when it comes to plans for this year, the first thing we're doing now is that we have just re-recorded guitars for the last demo we ever did with Andy back in 2005. So we have re-recorded the guitars, and we're gonna find a suitable weekend in the coming weeks to enter Andy's studio again to remix those demos, and it's just gonna be released on a vinyl. It's going to be an EP. And we're going to play Desert Fest in London in May. We have a show here in Gothenburg as well coming up. And then we're just going to keep writing for the next album, and we're going to see what happens.
Do you have any dates in mind for the EP?
No, it's too early to say, but definitely this year.
Cool.
It's gonna be awesome.
Okay. I think that's about all I got for you. Is there anything else that you would like to tell anybody in the Fuzz Club or the listeners or anything like that about Astroqueen, Into Submission, past, present, future, anything like that?
I want to thank everyone for supporting us and just keep listening to this 20-year-old album. It's fucking amazing to know that it means so much to people, and it's a true honor. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Daniel.
Thank you.
Alrighty, this is part 2 of the Astroqueen Into Submission Fuzz Club episode. Now we have the Fuzz Club here. We'll let everyone kind of go around and introduce themselves real quick, because I think it's probably been a little while. We did the Best of 2023 episode, and we took a week off before that, and maybe after that, and I don't know, it's been a little while. So in case anyone's just joining us for the first time or hasn't watched in a while, we'll let Eddy kick things off and introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Eddy from the Endless Lotoc and Aiwass.
Bucky, Doom Charts, Ripple Effect Blog, Underground,
Benriz.
The Aficionado.
My name is Ben, aka Benriz. I'm in the band Lost Dutchman.
And I am Pat from Monster Riff.
Right on. All right. So, Astroqueen Into Submission. Did anyone hear this for the first time when we decided to do this one? Was anyone unaware of this album going into it? Oh, yeah?
Oh, no.
Really?
Holy
Wow.
it looked familiar, but I can't honestly say I remember anything specific. So
okay, yeah. So if you heard the interview part with Daniel and myself, you'll hear me gushing about it. How it was like one of the main, I would say like top 3 for me getting into stoner rock and stuff. Like an album that I heard maybe 8 years ago, and just was like, oh, this is like the kind of stuff that I need to keep looking for. This is the kind of stuff I want to hear. It's like got the fuzzy guitar tone. It's got just kind of like this upbeat, kind of tempo, and just like lyrically, just cosmic stuff, outer space stuff, I just loved everything about it immediately, and was like, I need more of this. And that's kind of when I went on this like stoner rock journey that, started with Astroqueen and Dio from Lowrider and a few other bands. But like this one has always been for me just like a monumental album that I always go back to. I might call it a desert island album, honestly. Like it's one of those things that if I could pick 5, this one might be it. Just because to me it like encapsulates like what I'm looking for in like stoner rock and stuff. So it didn't get a lot of publicity. It's kind of gone under the radar. They disappeared pretty shortly after this release in 2001, but they're kind of reforming now, which was cool. They've gotten a little bit more publicity through that, and Majestic Mountain put out the reissue of Into Submission recently, and they're working on new things. If you caught that interview, you heard a couple things from him. So anyway, for those of you that haven't heard this before, and those that did, you know, what'd you guys think? What was your initial reaction? Probably not quite as extreme as mine, I would assume, but maybe.
Oh man, it sounds exactly like you described. This reminds me of all the bands back in that era that got me into stoner rock in the whole like heavy hard rock scene as well. Like the Small Stone records, that was probably one of my when I discovered Small Stone, I was like, holy shit, like all those bands. It's really like the Truck Fighters, Fuzzorama Records bands, like it's got that Truck Fighters kind of fuzz sound with that aggressive kind of bass tone, and like,
it's fuzzy but energetic is like, you know, it's kind of like the only credential they need, I think.
Yeah.
It's funny that your story, Ryan, very much parallels my own, because like I'd gotten into stoner rock through like Clutch and Queens and then like Truck Fighters, but then I remember I found this record and Love Sex Volume by Cowboys and Aliens in like the same day.
Yeah.
I listened to those two back to back for literally weeks, like just on repeat. I'd listen to one and then the other. And there was a moment in time where like Superhuman God and Ghost in My Speakers were like my two favorite songs in the world. And those were like weeks. There was one weekend I just listened to this album like all day, each day. And it just blew me away that, you know, you get a lot of like those really thick, heavy, fuzzy tones in Queens, and you get them in Truck Fighters as well. But I think to your point, this is just so over the top, energetic, and infectious. And there's something really charming and disarming in this, while still being like just the best sort of party version of stoner rock.
Yeah.
I found this to be like a party type vibe, you know, like a uplifting music kind of thing. I'm surprised I haven't given them more attention before this, because it sounds like Truck Fighters, a lowrider, and stuff that I've always been into. I'll definitely keep it with.
It seems like a lot of those bands around this era, like early 2000s, and from Sweden in that area, like maybe we just kind of got lucky that we found this one and not like the Awesome Machine, which we just talked about on 2 episodes ago. Because they're from Sweden, came out the same time, had the same producer, which we can talk about, the Andy LaRock from King Diamond, which we kind of went over in the Awesome Machine episode. So there's so many similarities. There's a lot of overlap with like Dozer and Greenleaf, which we talked about, Awesome Machine, Astroqueen, all these bands. And like, maybe it was just, lucky that we found Astroqueen, but not the Awesome Machine or whatever, or vice versa for some people, I guess, because I don't know that any of it like blew up or anything, but this one's just always been like such a staple for me. But I guess it could have went a different way if I had, not just found it randomly on YouTube suggestions or whatever it was, back then.
Yeah, and I was reading up, like I could swear I've heard it before. It's just one of those, my memory sucks these days, but it said that it was originally released on vinyl only, like
I didn't know that.
Back in 2001 or something. And that could have been maybe why it didn't get kind of pushed as much as like the Caius and the Truck Fighters and some of those bands from that era. It didn't. Maybe that's a reason why it kind of went under the radar. Is folks were,
it's kind of weird. I mean, after doing that Awesome Machine episode, we were kind of like, well, how didn't this do better? I had the guy from King Diamond producing it and all this kind of stuff. And this seemed like the exact same story almost. I mean, I happen to know this one and not the Awesome Machine, but it's like almost the exact same story. They sound similar, had similar people involved and whatnot. So it's just kind of weird that it kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people.
It does sound pretty similar.
Yeah.
I mean, in fairness to the time that this and the Awesome Machine kind of came out, I mean, our attention was not on stoner rock coming from Sweden. We had another movement in music that was taking a little bit more precedence at the time,
For sure, yeah. And for that, to that point, I didn't discover this in 2001 at all. I mean, it was just much later on down the road. So
that was the new metal days.
Yeah, I unfortunately was at the perfect time in my life for new metal. I was like just tail end of middle school or something. So, it was like Korn and Deftones and whatnot, big baggy jeans for me, unfortunately. But
the metalcore era kind of like
and that post grunge too.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say is I remember hearing more about Killswitch Engage than Truck Fighters from back
Oh,
then.
definitely. Yeah. I mean, I gradually got into more metal, like heavier and heavier and heavier metal. At that time, it definitely wasn't. I wasn't interested in hearing, stoner rock. I didn't even know that was a thing at that point. But
Oh man, I still love me some Fu Manchu and some Caius. I mean, I always have. I mean, we didn't have the smorgasbord that we do now. I mean, we can choose whatever mood of stoner rock we want to get into nowadays. You want depressive, you want happy, and pretty much covered. Then it was like you had peanut butter and you had chocolate, no other flavors.
yeah. It was still when like radio was somewhat relevant. I mean, I would turn on the radio in my small town and it would just be, it would be like Def Leppard still, like, and, all day, just Def Leppard and Tom Petty and stuff, which I like, but, Nickelback and Creed were on top of the world at that point. So it's hard to get anything else on the radio.
I don't think this stuff ever made it to any radio. Maybe
No,
XM radio, like certain personalities might play a few tracks.
Even now, I don't know. Is there like stoner rock, like
There's
satellite radio?
I'm going to do a quick plug for Cosmic Fuzz FM.
Okay.
They're based out of England, and they play. You can stream 24/7 stoner rock, and like it's like Doom, stoner, fuzz.
But that's like internet radio, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
but it's internet. Yeah,
you're not going to
there's some internet radios.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a good one on Cranium called Doom Tomb Podcast. Dude's local here to Phoenix.
Sure. Yeah, I know that one a little bit, but so the other thing that I liked about this one a lot was just that it's kind of like relentless throughout. I think there's I don't know what was it, like 11 or something tracks. It's like 50 minutes, and like there's not a soft tune on it. It's all like pretty like heavy, fuzzy, upbeat. There's not like a ballad on it. There's not like it's just like constant. They just keep writing these same like similar vibe songs, and they just did it all the way throughout. And it's hard to pick like kind of a favorite. I don't know about you guys, but to me that they all stand out from each other pretty well. But it's just like this I'm not trying to make it sound like they're all too similar to each other, not in a bad way, not in a negative way, but I mean like they're just kind of relentless in that tone that they have, I think.
100%. And I don't ever listen to this wanting a ballad, but I'd be really curious to hear what they would be like with a little bit more acoustic guitar in it, sort of like Truck Fighters does, because occasionally they'll whip out an acoustic guitar and it'll just be gorgeous, especially when it melds with the rest of their sound.
Yeah.
So I would be curious to see what this would sound like with that. But to answer your original question, my favorite track is definitely Superhuman God. There's so much emotion packed into that.
Yeah.
And
I think that was always the standout one for me too. I think that's the one that I added to the Slightly Fuzzed playlist, years ago, and I think that was always kind of the one that I went back to a lot. But I think it kind of changes over the years too. There's different ones that stand out, and maybe to that point, that unreleased track. I don't know if anyone else checked that one out. It's called Catapult, and it's a great tune. It fits right along with everything else that they've put on this album. And talking to Daniel about it, it sounded like they just kind of ran out of time. It wasn't that it was like inferior or anything, and they just kind of ran out of time. It didn't get the Andy LaRock touch. He had to go like do a date or something, and it just didn't make it to the album. But it's cool to hear a new song after all these years, like 20 years later. But it also sounds like they're working on some new material, which is exciting. I think it'll be interesting to hear what that sounds like all these years later.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can't remember if it was Superhuman God. I was listening like just the last 15 minutes before the show. I was like, oh shit, I better kind of catch up. I think it was track 2, Out of This World, that caught my ear on the chorus, the vocals. Like there was a very melodic, like catchy chorus. It could have been track 3, but I thought it was the second track, Out of This World. Maybe you could clarify that, Pat. Like it just
Out of This World is number 2.
Yeah. Does it have like a really like catchy chorus line, like the vocals? Like, I mean, that was one thing I noticed. Like the vocals are, I enjoy the way he sings, and
I do too. Yeah,
it's aggressive, but it's very melodic at the same time, like with the choruses, and
it's
got that.
I think that's the other thing about this album that I've always liked too, is the vocals don't like they don't get on my nerves or anything. Like some of the bands, even 8 years ago when I first heard this, some of the bands that I kind of glossed over were bands that had like kind of rough vocals. Well, like maybe they kind of like spoke them a little bit more. They didn't sing them, or they didn't quite have the voice, or this one just was like, it fit the music. It didn't, I don't know. It didn't ruin it for me. It didn't throw it off for me. It complemented that fuzzy guitar tone pretty well, I thought. And sometimes it's hard, especially in stoner rock and stuff. Sometimes I don't totally dig the vocals, and I think sometimes they're just kind of thrown in as almost an afterthought, which can happen. But these seem to fit for me at least.
And Buggy, I had to reacquaint myself with the lyrics for Out of This World, but it does have like a really, really cool vocal delivery and has some really cool lyrics and melody as well on that one. So it might have been track 2.
I think it was track 2, yeah, because I think I was only on track 3 when the podcast or this was about to start, so I didn't get re-caught up. I listened to it last week a little bit, but I'm still not totally caught up.
Y'all doing the remastered version, or are you going with the actual like release?
I did the remastered one just because it just came out, and I had heard the original so many times, and I wanted to hear that unreleased track and stuff like that. But you know, if we're talking about the original release, maybe we should have all agreed on the original. But I don't know if they're super different. You know?
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you notice a difference?
I didn't. But I'm not that guy. I'm not the right guy to ask. I don't know. Maybe Benriz, you probably would notice a difference if there was one.
I did dabble a toe in both, just kind of A/B to see if there was like a noticeable difference with headphones, let alone with speakers, and there isn't much of one. The remastered's a little bit brighter and a little bassier in some spots, but that's about it. Yeah. I mean, I went with the remaster just for straight listen because similar reasons as you there. I kind of wanted the entire experience. I wanted the new song. I didn't know if that was included with the homework or not, but I didn't want to be unprepared. I can definitely see this like kind of like lingering around in a playlist in one way or another. There's good continuity, like all the way around, and I think the remaster kind of brought that out a little bit.
One of the other things with talking to Daniel, I asked kind of about the gear and the tone and that kind of stuff, and he mentioned that it was just like real simple. It was just plugged into the amp, and that was about it. It wasn't too weren't any effects or anything like that. And some of you guys that are more gearheads than I am maybe have something to say about that. But what I thought was interesting about it was that a lot of these bands that we talked about that were like, wow, you know, that they got a good tone out of this or whatever. A lot of times it comes out the simpler the better, you know, I guess. And that was kind of the case in this one.
Yeah.
Thoughts
Definitely.
on that, your guy?
I'll let somebody else jump in.
I'm not your guy for that.
Yeah.
I can hear you saying about the being more like a guitar straight to the amp. It's like this sounds very raw to me, like a very punchy. So keeping it simple, it's good.
Well, did they even have options back then?
Well, it definitely sounds like they're using a fuzz. I mean, it sounds like a big muff that's got the tone like cranked all the way down. I mean, it definitely sounds like it's being played through a wet wool blanket.
Yeah. So we touched on it a little bit, or I at least brought it up, but Andy from King Diamond produced this record, as well as The Awesome Machine, which we just kind of talked about a few weeks ago. And I just thought that was really interesting because I didn't know that going into The Awesome Machine or this one all these years, but they sound so similar, and just having that connection to him, it's hard to get my mind around. I just thought that was so strange, but the fact that they both did around the same time and that they sound similar and stuff, I just thought that was really fascinating. And I thought that maybe I heard something about him helping with, you know, what they're working on now too. So I just thought that was really interesting. I don't know what you guys think about that, but just having him involved in this, you know, this scene and stoner rock and stuff coming from King Diamond, I just thought all of it was just really interesting. But you know,
it's almost seems like a random name to have attached to this record in particular.
Yeah,
for sure.
Maybe Andy was into Lebanese hash that particular year.
Yeah.
Well, and it was remastered by Esben Willems from Monolord.
Oh,
He
I don't
was
know that I knew
involved.
that either.
That's the remastered by Esben from Monolord.
That's cool.
At
He's
least
got a
on
good
the
ear.
Bandcamp, that's what it says.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So the artwork too, I don't have anything groundbreaking to say about the artwork or anything, but I did always like it. It fits, the aesthetic of the band and what I'm hearing and everything. I just thought it was cool. For some reason, I thought there was a story out there that it came from like an old sci-fi novel or something, but now I can't seem to find that story anywhere. It seems like it was designed by a guy named Martin Westerstrand. He's from Sweden. He's a musician himself, as well as a designer and artist. So he's the one that created this. I don't know if it was like a painting or what at the time, but then one of the guys that we all know, I'm assuming, Branca Studios did the remastered work for the new reissue. He just put his own kind of flair on it, not anything too crazy different. Used the original artwork in there and incorporated it into some new style, but for some reason, like I said, I thought it was something to do with a sci-fi novel, but I could just have made that up. It seems like that's very possible.
Seems plausible.
yeah. I like that remastered art a lot. Like it brings a kind of a modern spin to it, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of jealous I didn't get in on this the vinyl copies. It looks like it's sold out, and they're going.
I was gonna say, man, you
$8.
should get this one on vinyl. They got like a red, white, and blue
I missed the
splatter or
boat.
something. I think. Yeah.
Missed the boat, man. I can buy.
I even thought about. I didn't even have a record player when this came out on vinyl, and I even thought about just buying it because it's just one of those records where I'm like, someday I'll have a record player and I'm gonna need this one, and I didn't jump on it, but.
Yeah, I would buy it just for the artwork. I mean, it's such a cool layout. It's iconic.
Yeah.
It'd be great just to have on the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going for like $70-$80 on like Discogs, buying like third party. Like
really for the reissue or the original?
I think it's the reissue.
Damn. That's crazy.
But the original is probably going for even more. I'd imagine if it's because either way, I don't think there was a lot of either version printed.
Probably not. But
we're talking a couple hundred copies out there.
We're also talking about a band that no one's really heard of. I'm just surprised that they go for that much. That's awesome.
No, it's not very many.
Yeah.
Which is kind of it's the case in our scene. Like we're such a tiny blip on the world map. Like when we're talking about all these records, and half of the stuff we talk about, there's less than like 200-300 of the record, like physical copies in circulation to begin with. And that it sounds like a big number in this tiny little circle of ours, but it's crazy to think about.
Yeah, for sure. So what else about this record? I talked to him a little bit about the impact that this record had on stoner rock, and it's still kind of debatable, I guess, to me, because to me it was so important. But like talking to you, like 3 out of the 5 here had never heard it up to this point. So I don't fully understand, what the impact of this record is on stoner rock or anything else. Maybe someone else can kind of throw their thoughts in there on there. To me, it's so important. If someone asked me like what kind of album they should put on to get into it, like this is one that I bring up. Like I said, it's like a Mount Rushmore, Desert Island kind of a record for me, but it doesn't seem to have gotten quite that. I mean, there's a lot of bands that I think, even Lowrider we did an episode on, I think a lot of people would probably put that, in that category maybe before this one, or had at least heard of them, before Astroqueen. But I don't know, where do you think it falls in kind of the legacy of stoner rock and all that kind of stuff?
For me, it's kind of like Shawshank Redemption. Like everybody loves it. Nobody ever talks about it. I can't remember the last time somebody mentioned Shawshank Redemption, but like everyone who ever mentions, oh yeah, I love that movie. It's so great. And I think the people that I've talked to that have heard this record before, they're like, oh, it's great. But no one talks about it. It's just there and it's wonderful. And I think that maybe if they had been able to do a second record or a third record, maybe they would have a bit more legacy. Mm-hmm. But they just burned out before they could really do anything. And that's unfortunate, but it's a terrific record. And I'm curious for Benriz, Eddy, Bucky, now that you've heard it, how do you kind of place it in your mind, among your other like favorite records from the scene?
I could place it up there with those like Truck Fetters and Lowrider and Dozer and stuff like that. It's comparable. It's on the same level for sure. I would recommend it for anybody who's getting into stone rock. I'm excited to listen to it some more.
Yeah,
I've already passed it on to a couple of buddies.
Nice.
Yeah.
Lowrider definitely got a little bit of a boost more recently because they put out an album in 2020, and I hope the same happens for Astroqueen when they put something out this year and maybe next year. But Lowrider always kind of seemed to have gotten more accomplished with Odio than this one did, I think, at least from my understanding.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Kind of the same deal with Awesome Machine. Like Dozer gets a little bit more play than they do.
Uh-huh.
It's certainly in the same like realm of all the bands we've talked about more. Like from a quality standpoint, the sound is there. It fits in that same mold, and it kind of to me, this sound just takes me back to when I kind of discovered like Small Stone Records and some of those bands from back in that era. I mean, you even got Sasquatch like back then, and there's some other bands that aren't talked about either, like Brain Police and some stuff like that on Small Stone that I consider quintessential like stoner rock bands in the scene.
Yeah.
And they kind of, some did better than others, some fizzled out, but
with Ripple's new Beneath the Desert Floor thing that I discovered the Awesome Machine through and because of, and now with like a band like this coming back on Majestic Mountain, and then Lowrider having a record 20 years later, that kind of stuff, and it seems like a good time to form a reunion or reissue or record new music or whatever. Hopefully more bands do it, and I'm sure there's so many bands that I've still never heard of and whatnot. I mean, we've kind of talked about it before, but I always think that I've heard just about all of it at this point, and there's new bands all the time that I'm like, oh shit, I had no clue that this thing existed. So let's see.
And the one thing I did want to ask Ryan is, as you were talking during your earlier interview, it sounds like they put this out, they were basically kids. Like, were they like 18, 19, 20? Is that the impression that you get? Because he like talked about performing when they were like 18-ish.
Yeah, I don't remember any ages. I could be wrong, but I don't remember any ages getting brought up necessarily. But it sounded like they weren't really concerned with like the reception of it. I think is kind of what he said. They were just like, we were just playing music, wanted to put out a record, and we did it. And then there was no internet, so we didn't even follow up. We didn't see how it did or anything. So that to me registered as we were just kids playing a band, didn't give a shit, So I would make the assumption that they were kids, although I don't remember exactly.
I mean, yeah, how old are they now? That would tell you how old.
Yeah, it's true.
45.
That was my favorite part of the interview, was him being like, "Oh yeah, we didn't even realize people liked it," and it's just been on the internet, just like gaining momentum for 15 years.
Yeah, and I think that I remember like trying to do my homework a long time ago on them and just being like, what happened? Where's anything else? Why didn't they put out more stuff? And I think I remember finding, maybe it was Daniel, like a couple side projects or something, went on to do different stuff, different music. And I thought, if I remember correctly, it was a little heavier. It was like more like metal or something. I don't remember fully, but they all went on to do different things and have different tastes and stuff. I just thought that was interesting that, you never know. Everyone, that's a different story that comes up a lot. I mean, even talking to Peter and Lowrider, went on to have a great career in like design and video and all this kind of stuff, and was like a Lowrider. Who's talking about Lowrider? And everyone's like, we love Lowrider. What do you mean? Like, and there's like this whole other like world happening to the band that they don't even really realize, because they're off living life, having kids and a career and stuff that they don't even fully realize. Well, anything else about Into Submission for anybody?
Killer record.
Yeah, I was super stoked to finally talk about it a little bit, and then talking to Daniel on top of it was awesome for me, and I hope everyone goes out and listens to it. It's just been one of those records for me throughout the years that I always just put on when I can't find anything else to listen to. It's always there. So glad we finally got to talk about it a little bit, and I hope more people listen to it. So
So-
we can go around and everyone can plug whatever they're up to if you want.
So
Eddie can-
before we go, so when you talked to them, did they talk about the new, like they're gonna put out some new stuff?
Yeah, so I think what he said was they are gonna aim for an EP in 2024
Okay.
of some sort. I believe it's coming out through Majestic.
Okay.
And then they're gonna write a full album after that. But I'm guessing that the way it sounded was more like reasonably 2025 or something like that. Yeah, maybe a little ways off. So yeah.
That's
I think
cool.
they have some material left from this era. I think that was kind of what he said too, was like they have some songs or stuff they hadn't fully polished up yet that they were going to try to kind of repurpose, re-record. I think he might have said they were going to re-record some stuff, or at least guitars or something like that, and put out an EP on it. So yeah, hopefully sometime soon we'll hear something new-ish from Astroqueen, and maybe new for sure next year, hopefully.
Their name fits right in the scene. I mean,
Yeah,
surprising.
yeah,
Like,
it's super fitting for everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any final thoughts? Let's call it. All right, Eddie, lead us off.
The Endless debut album comes out January 23rd. I'm pretty excited about that. It's my first official studio album. So, and Aiwass has something in the works that you're going to hear pretty soon too. I can't say anything else about that.
Cool. That's exciting, man. Congrats on the Endless and stuff. That's awesome.
Thanks, man.
So Doom Charts has kind of been trickling out a bunch of best of the year lists from all the contributors. If you've been go over to doomcharts.com, it's always a fun time of year. See what everyone else's favorites were, and lots of variety and stuff that you may have missed out on. Just kind of a checklist. Oh shit, I need to go find that one. And then they should be putting out the top like 100 or top albums of the year as like tallied. So that's what we used to always do, that like tally up all the votes for the whole year and get one big master list of like 2,000 something albums. It's a crazy number, and it's like the top 100. So that's always pretty representative of the scene and where we're at. So yeah, that's
cool.
All coming out soon.
Ben?
Well, I was just on an episode of the Eddy Radio. If anybody happens to like internet radio, I just did an internet radio show. It's also available on YouTube. That's what I got.
Cool. Yeah. Are you on mute? What's going on here?
I am on mute. Sorry about
okay.
that.
Sorry.
I think Monster Riff is back. I was a little bit on a writing hiatus there, but I think we've got my son on a sleep schedule that allows me to write again. Thank you, Ryan, for keeping things alive with a lot of satire. But we'll be back to new articles every Friday, satire every other Tuesday. We're going to start doing the podcast on a regular basis again, and hopefully have some more guest posts and stuff coming out this year. So 2024 should be a good year for Monster Riff.
Cool. All right, everybody. Go check out Astroqueen into submission, and be on the lookout for more, and check out the next Fuzz Club. Later.
See ya.